The What's Neat This Week video podcast is supported by enthusiastic model railroaders just like you. Additional support is provided by Athearn Trains. Check out all their new monthly announcements at athearn.com.
Additional support for What's Neat This Week is brought to you by SoundTraxx, industry leaders in model railroad sound and technology for over 30 years. Now please visit our website at SoundTraxx.com, and at checkout, be sure to use the promo code WNTW15 for 15% off of your purchases. And while you're there, be sure to check out our YouTube channel and other information that we have on our website to help you get more familiar with Model Railroader Reader's Choice Award winner 2 times for Favorite Sound Decoder.
Further support is provided by the NCE Corporation, the power of DCC. Visit their website at ncedcc.com. And thank you for supporting the What's Neat This Week podcast. This is the What's Neat This Week show in model railroading, show number 125 for August 8th, 2020. I've got with me tonight Sugarfire Joshua Barton.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Joshua. Also on Skype tonight, I've got Greg McComas.
Good evening.
Hi, Greg. And also I have George Bogatak out there from SoundTraxx.
Howdy, everybody.
How is it out there in Durango, George?
Oh, the weather's beautiful out here. We've been mid-80s during the day and sunny, so it's been wonderful.
That's awesome. You can't ask for better than that. And the weather has also been absolutely fantastic here. I've been able to get a lot of photo shoots in this week. Thank you very much. And to start with, and I want to start with these photos right now because I love eye candy on the show. I shot these beautiful SD90 Mac locomotives in Union Pacific. These are hot off the press, available now from Athearn Trains. And they are absolutely beautiful. I chose to do a sunrise photograph. Let me show that to you right now. And the reason I did the shot like this without the sun directly in the frame was I wanted to exemplify the fact that these LED lights and the ditch lights are just so bright. Beautiful, running the light up the side of the locomotive and the LEDs lit, track work, a very nice shot. I shot a little bit of video for you guys too because I know you guys like to see my setups, how we set this up. I didn't layer the scenery so much on this one as I did stacking engines behind each other to block the tree in the backyard, but no direct sun in the photo. Those shots I get in December when the sun rises straight across from where I'm at. Also on the table tonight, and I'm really excited about these beautiful Kodachrome locomotives. I've got the SD45-2s in the Don't Paint So Fast paint scheme, SPSF. Of course, you know that locomotive was painted around the 1st of July, 1986, because they were in anticipation of the Southern Pacific Santa Fe merger back in 1986. And then, of course, around the middle of July, actually specifically on July 24th, the Interstate Commerce Commission turned down the merger, denied it. And so these engines, you know, they then started getting obviously repainted back into the blue and the yellow war bonnets. But these are also from Athearn. And I want to talk about these because I shot a lot of photographs of these outside. First of all, I'm going to show you number 7213. That's just in the SF paint scheme, and that's an SD45. And I also shot the other one, the SPSF locomotive, number 7221. And they only painted 2 of these in that full-fledged paint job with all the letters on it. They painted 7219, and they painted 7221. And 7221 is the one that I have on the table here. Now, I want to tell you a story about that. I happened to be in Claiborne, Texas, the day on the 24th of July. I was there in 1986, the day that the merger had gotten turned down. And at some show, I'd love to show you all of the photographs because I had a grand tour of the facility, inside and out, the shops, the outsides, all the paint jobs being done at the time, because there was a gentleman in the office that I asked permission to be on the property, and he's like, oh yeah, by the way, the merger just got turned down a few minutes ago, and I don't feel like being in the office anymore today. And so he took me and my girlfriend out on a grand tour. We got to go inside some locomotives, and it was amazing to see. And I had no idea the historical moment that I was witnessing at the time, because at the time I wasn't following it that closely.
Right.
But gosh, someday I want to show a lot of different photographs of that day, because I remember shooting 4 or 5 rolls of film in Claiborne, Texas, the day the merger got turned down. And that, of course, is the facilities where they were rebuilding the CF7 locomotives into those really interesting cab units. And they had all of these various SD45s and all the rebuilds. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about. You guys can chime in on this if you want, because I'm going to touch a hot potato. And generally, we don't do that on the show, but I'm going to go ahead and stick my fingers in the fire on this one. I've heard a lot of comments on the internet about the fact that, oh my gosh, these locomotives these days are cost prohibitive. They're so expensive. You know, I can't afford a $300 locomotive these days. And I want to tell you, I thought about that in great detail this week when I was shooting these SD45s outside, these SD45-2s. I want to show you the roof shot of this SD45-2. There's a group of 4 units here, and I want you to look at the intricate detail on the roof. The lighting, the air conditioner units, all of the platforms for the antennas, the Sinclair antennas to sit on top of. I also shot a shot of the fan detail. Look at these see-through fans. You blow on them and the fan would actually spin. Now, we didn't have detail on locomotives back in 1987 when I was trying to do my Kodachrome paint job on this GP38-2, I believe is what this is. This is a blue box engine. This is the Athearn engines where you get a bunch of pieces of metal for handrails, and you would have to bend them yourselves. Of course, there were brass handrails that you could purchase and put on your locomotives. And on a lot of these units, this one doesn't even have wheels on it, how about that? But on a lot of these units, it was nothing for me at the time to buy Details West, Detail Associates parts, screens, and spend over $150 to detail out my blue box unit. And as you recall, a lot of blue box units had wide hoods on them. So you had to cut the hoods right up the middle, narrow the hoods before you could even start on your projects.
So you said $150 is what you would spend on
detail parts.
Now, hours-wise, how many hours did you put into having that?
I spent, I want to say on some of these units, maybe 4 weeks, possibly 6 weeks, drilling out the holes, putting all the individual grabs in.
And that's what, an hour every night? 4 hours every night?
The way I worked on my stuff, probably 4 or 5 hours a day. Not to mention the various color paints you had to buy. I think this is the first time I used AccuFlex paint, which was new at the time. The microscale decals, the Mishima motors that I would replace the Athearn motors with. A great deal of time. And even then, and I want to show you a picture of, this is an F45 in Kodachrome. This is the one that I did. I want to show you a picture of the Athearn F45 out of the box compared to mine. I mean, actually, I shouldn't do this because it's embarrassing.
Well,
it shows the fact that even though I did spend a great deal of time and money on these, I still didn't have the drop steps. I still didn't have the MU hoses, the see-through steps going up the side where you can see through these days, and never mind the headlights. I mean, that's a whole nother deal. Windshield wipers, glass. We didn't have LEDs back then. My whole point is this. I worked at a hardware store when I was doing these locomotives, and I was making $3.35 an hour minimum wage. Minimum wage today is around, what, $10 an hour, something to that effect? And so when you quantify that I would spend over, I don't know, $50 or $80 for the locomotive, whatever they were, and then all the parts and the motors and all the things, I would be into one of these units at close to over $200, $250 a piece.
Plus all your time. I would rather personally come buy a Athearn engine or an engine from another company and not have to do anything except for put it right on the track. And program my decoder, and I'm off to the races.
Look how much time it takes away from building the layout.
Correct.
When you're having to build the locomotives and you're building 3. And my whole point is, what you get in a box today finished, it's exquisite.
Yeah.
It's like jewelry. It's got all the detail parts on it, including fans and other details that we didn't have, including scale stanchions, which we didn't have. We had the old clunky thick stanchions, even if you bought the brass ones to put on your locomotives. So today, you get a much better quality locomotive for $300. And when you equate it to 1986 money, I'm guessing that's $100 per locomotive if you figured back.
Yeah.
So in reality, if you actually quantify everything sort of that I just tried to cover, politically correct, of course, I think it's a bargain. It's a bargain to get something finished. You buy 3 of them, they're ready to rock and roll. And oh, by the way, we didn't have sound back in the 80s.
Right.
Right, George? Thank you very much. Look at the amazing sound and lighting effects. Okay, so I put in grain of wheat bulbs, and they would burn out after running them for X amount of weeks, and I'd have to replace those. So we always kept the wires easy to get to. In fact, we put plugs in. The LEDs don't burn out. So there's so many more benefits to today's models for the price that I don't think, in reality, if you think it through, that these are overpriced for the market. And goodness gracious, figure the numbers if they were made in the United States. My Ford dealership charges $123 an hour to work on my vehicle. If you spent $123 an hour to have something like this built, this would be a $2,000 or $3,000 plastic locomotive.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways to quantify it where I think it's not really a justifiable complaint. And I just wanted to bring that up. I usually don't get involved in conversations like this, but I felt strong about it after I looked at that roof shot of all 4 of those engines together outside this week, and I was like astonished at the detail. So I'll get off my soapbox with that.
Well, actually, if it's all right, I'd like to chime in a little bit on this, because I was one of those guys that would spend the hours doing the detail parts. And one of the things I'd like to add in is, God forbid, what would happen if you messed up or drilled a hole off center. Now your grab iron is either crooked or that fan's off center. Now you're having to spend an hour centering that hole, filling it in with putty, and trying to smooth it out so that you can't see that you screwed up. And these things are done that way out of the box. And then, we talk about.
Oh, sorry.
We talk about.
My grab irons are crooked.
They are crooked.
They are crooked.
Well, hey, I've got my share. I actually have one of my early first blue box detail kits. And remember those Detail Associate air hoses that you had to do, and they were cast in plastic, so they stuck out when they were sticking there. And now we've got the either the cast metal ones or the rubber ones that now kind of hang a little bit more natural.
Yeah.
And but even adding sound, I mean, we could spend easily an hour to 2 hours putting in sound. And to kind of talk about what you were talking about, Ken, with lighting effects. I mean, remember the early days in 1986, we didn't have all these lighting effects. We had to build a circuit board with like an LM317, I think it was, processor. We had to wire up and touch certain pins, and then we had to tuck that up inside the model in addition to the motor and any other lights to create a specific blinking light. If you remember the early Lifelike Proto 2000 E-units, they had a 3-volt light bulb with 2 elements inside of it that would alternate and flash. And that was what we had for lighting effects. And then, so as we progress, the technology gets better. I mean, SoundTraxx, the first product we had as a company was called the Hyperlight.
Yes,
and
I do remember that.
And the Hyperlight was the first processor-driven lighting module in model trains. And what you did was you cut a trace on that circuit board, and then that processor would determine, okay, this circuit is open now. I'm supposed to create a Mars light effect, or I'm supposed to create a rotary beacon effect. And that was a leap ahead at those days. And so now all that stuff is built into the decoder. We still use the term hyperlights today when we talk about our lighting effects. And, so that's, you talk about that and sound and always looking to get a smaller circuit board and more lights. And, so you look at that Athearn SD45-2 that you're working on there. That's an 8-function lighting effect circuit board, and that's a full Tsunami 2 that you're getting in that model. And you're not making any sacrifices. And so, that decoder aftermarket sells for, $115. So that's a bargain based, for all that to be factory installed, and then you'd have to buy a speaker. So, I mean, that's to speak to your point. I agree, and what a time we live in today that we can go to the store and buy that.
Not only can you just buy one, but you can buy 3, and all 3 are different. I don't have them on the show tonight, but next week I will. I've got the SDP45 cowl units from Santa Fe with the notch nose.
Yeah.
And I've got 3 of them down here, and all 3 are different. One of them is primed for grime. It's got various paints on the front, various paint patches where the new handrails were put on. And there's yellow horns on the one and blue horns on the other. And these are locomotive numbers specific for the detail.
Right.
Because I know Matt Gentry does his homework over there at Athearn and makes sure that all this stuff is exactly right before it comes out. And that in itself, imagine the amount of time we used to spend researching in books. And that was another whole part of the aspect was I would go out and photograph these, the ones that I did, for example, Missouri Pacific with the spark arresters. I would photograph those engines from all sides, all the way around. So taking the risk of getting on railroad property without getting caught or having permission, shooting film, price of driving, the research work that you would have to do, the books that you would have to buy before you even started one of these projects.
Yep.
I mean, in order to take it seriously, you needed the research. You could not just blindly start painting one of these. I remember CTC board. I had the magazine laid out on the table when I was doing these Kodachromes because they were the first publication to publish Kodachromes. And sometimes it's a matter of the paints that you get weren't the right color. So you're mixing 2 tones of red just to get the red color right. I appreciate the fact that all the research is done. I would rather spend my 6 weeks either working on scenery or working my real job so I can feed my family, and then at the end of the month have a little bit left over to purchase one of these locomotives and then budget it out one a month until I got a set of 3.
Yep.
So thank you very much for the way it is. It's not going to last forever like this. Someday, costs in China are going to be cost prohibitive, and manufacturing will either be moved to another country or moved back here into the U.S., and we're going to be paying full nickel for these models.
Right.
So let's just love it while it is. Let's not complain, and don't send me hate mail in the readers' comments. But I would be interested in finding out what everybody else's opinions is out there. I've spent 15 minutes on this. That's way too much. Michael Cobflesh contacted me. Now, last week we talked about 2 new manufacturers, which I was excited to talk about.
Absolutely.
One of them, Greg, is you, right?
Yes.
MacRailProductions.com. And you did relatively well this week. Your website traffic, I think you told me, was very, very aggressive this week.
Very aggressive, yes. And so it sells.
Well, you have a great looking product, so
Thank you.
absolutely.
And also John Fowler is another company we talked about, ZYX Creative. He's the one who made the tunnel portholes, and I showed their website. He called me yesterday elated. Thank you very much, he said. People not only are purchasing his product on his website, but they're sharing the product on the internet on different forums. I think there's some forum called Train Orders or something like that, where they mentioned his product on that website. So I'm really happy that we can help share the hobby and help it grow, help it bloom, and help people prosper in
and
what
let
it is.
people know about these great products that everyone is coming out with. It's absolutely fabulous.
So tonight we've got another new manufacturer, and actually he's not new. He said he's been doing this for a while, but he doesn't get very much attention. Now, you know F-scale. F-scale is 122.3. That's the Bachmann G scale, like the K27 above my head right here. There's 2,000 parts in that locomotive. Absolutely super detailed scale. Now, the guys that model that outside don't get crazy about super detailing, but the gentlemen that do model that scale inside, they are, I don't want to use the word fanatics, but they are very thorough in their detail.
Very much so.
And what Michael Cobflesh makes are F-scale products printed at Shapeways. For example, on the table I've got a what is that called?
Fire hydrant.
Yeah, fire hydrant. Oh my God, senior moment. He sent me a whole box of details: telephone pole insulators, valves, pipes, bearings, flywheels, all types of details that you would use for detailing out a gold mill or a stamping mill or an industrial building in F scale. For those guys that have that scale and like the super detail, I interviewed a gentleman in Colorado that had a beautiful F scale layout, indoors, well lit, absolutely gorgeous layout. But Michael wanted me to mention his website, and he shared these products with me over a month ago, and they've been sitting on top of my refrigerator, so I'm just getting around to talking about it. But what you do is you go to shapeways.com, and then his company is Hyphatis. I'm going to spell it for you. It's Greek. Hyphatis Design Studio, and it's spelled Hephaestus Design Studio. Or he said you can simply enter the word HDS, HD as in dog, and S, on shapeways.com in the search, and you can find 4 or 5 pages, and I'll screen roll this right now for you so you can see one of the pages, of all the beautiful different items that he makes in F-scale, super detailed, printed out. And again, another wonderful company that isn't very well known about in our industry. Denny Yelsma sent us some hats with our brand new logo on them, and it's really nice. He thought of winter hats, and I love these because these are necessary when it's cold. But it says on there, what's neat this week in model railroading? Because when we went out to get wings after the show, patrons in the bar asked us were we a biker gang. Because when we wore our black jackets with the big logo on the back, What's Neat This Week, they didn't know what that meant. So we've added the words In Model Railroading to our logo, and it's on our hats, and it'll be on our jackets in the winter.
That's right.
But these are, thank you very much, Denny Yelsma. That's Yelsma Graphics, okay? And you get to it by going to yelsma.com on the internet. And I really appreciate the patronage that you guys give to Denny. Not doing train shows, sales are way off for Denny because Denny doesn't make trains. So we want to help him out any way we can with your groups, your clubs. And his stuff is not printed, it is sewn, it is stitched.
It's not just What's Neat This Week memorabilia. It's every train company that's around. I've seen all kinds of different stuff from Missouri Pacific to Union Pacific, CSX. I mean, he prints pretty much every different logo that they have out there.
That's it. So I've taken up the first 3/4 of the show. Sorry about that. Now we're going to go out, and I want to talk to Greg McComas, because Greg, as I've mentioned on previous shows, is a passionate model railroader, just like we are. And Greg, you've got to tell us about your passion. You've got your own private railroad called the Michigan Interstate Railroad. It's all yours, Greg.
Okay, I appreciate the time tonight. So, the Michigan Interstate, I grew up in Michigan. I'm a Texan now, but I grew up in Michigan as a kid, and I lived in the, basically in the shadows of the Grand Trunk and the CSX. During the high times of the automotive industry and the traffic levels. But anyways, I grew up in that area, and so that always kind of made an imprint on me. And so, been a modeler since I was 6. LGB to HO scale. I still have the LGB my parents had in their backyard, so we still have that around. But the Michigan Interstate is really kind of just genesis through high school, through college years. Now, as an adult with young kids, the layout's probably made a few different changes throughout the years and kind of manifested. So, now we have the current version, the St. Clair subdivision, which is basically a 100-mile route essentially, but we're modeling about 30 miles of it here in the room. And so the room itself is just the neat part of it is it's basically an office study. So I'm sitting behind me is actually the layout. So right now my computer is actually under the yard behind the staging. So it's kind of an integrated room. And there's double deck, has a helix. So the first iteration, I didn't plan for helix, came around and said, I need to redo it. I need to add a helix because that's how I get double or almost triple my running space for a small 10 by 13 room essentially. The helix itself is a third of the run. And that adds a lot of fun to the operators because it's real grades going up and down. So it adds a challenge to the, what is a flatland railroad in Michigan. So, the current version has, on a session, we do around 140 car movements. Wow. That's a lot of cars. The yard will turn over at least once in a session. We're running 12 trains a session. We have, scheduled merchandise, scheduled locals, yard jobs, anything you would kind of expect out of our Class 2 regional type railroad. So it's kind of scrappy, kind of modern. A lot of our locomotives are, we have ST-78s. We have the modern power, but we also got your GP-38s, GP-40s, and some stuff got repainted. Some stuff's been patched and thrown into service. Everything is mostly about 85% sound equipped. I am a SoundTraxx guy.
Yeah.
So, right. Yes. So, and that's exciting, because, by having one decoder on the layout, it allows for a consistent product. And that's, in my opinion, there's lots of discussions about, different decoders in the markets. And the market's great. I mean, we really are, in my opinion, the best time in the model railroad industry and the hobby because there's so many choices, right? But I chose SoundTraxx. I've been using it for a long time, and it's consistent. So I know the product. I can program the product. And I can operate the product. And that's what I love about it. And it's consistent. So great sound there. So sound adds a lot of element to a small room. Sometimes a little too much, so I have to turn them down a little bit. But and also during a session, I like to throw in trains that the guys don't know about. So maybe we'll run a high wide special. Maybe we'll have a wind blade train. We do aggregate trains, bulk commodities. So I have them all out there, and those guys don't really know what they're going to kind of get their hands on out of staging until it shows up, and that kind of adds to the excitement. Like the aggregate train. Is real rock, or it's Woodland Scenic's ballast. That's 14 cars loaded down with dental cups full of ballast. That adds a lot of weight to
It
a train.
does.
And coming down at
Absolutely.
2.5% helix, you get an operator sweating because you really wish you had dynamics to help that train come down. But that's the kind of thing, and it's exciting. Is the room itself is small. I can get 5 operators in this room, including myself as kind of the superintendent, troubleshooter, if you will. And I use a lot of curves, a lot of coves, so people, when they're working in certain areas of the layout, they really focus on the area they're in, and they kind of lose focus. Oh, this is a small room I'm in. This is a small yard or a small industry I'm working, but they're so focused on the task at hand and the area they're working that they really don't worry about the layout small.
These are beautiful photographs of the layout that you've
yes.
shared with us. We've shown the photographs of your various paint schemes on your locomotives, so it looks like you've got different eras. And you know what? Since you're such a cool guy, and I want to say something, I want to give you 15% off of your SoundTraxx decoders. George, tell us how that works.
So you go to SoundTraxx.com and put in the code WNTW15 at checkout, and you'll be getting 15% off of your purchases at SoundTraxx.com. Thanks, Ken.
How about that? Just a constellation for you being on the show. And of course, that includes all of our viewers out there too. We can't cut them out. So everybody gets 15% off this month of August on your SoundTraxx purchases. And you know, George, your decoders, they're just plug and play. You can just plug them in. You've got the sound systems. You've got all the various things. Did he freeze up? Or is he there?
I'm here.
Okay. Your installations, explain it to me briefly. You can just, like I showed on this month's video, you can plug them in, correct?
Yes, and in many cases it is. It depends on the locomotive model that you're installing it into. Sometimes there's that 21-pin interface, which we have the 21P NEM decoder, and we also have the new 8-function version that I actually installed into this Intermountain Tier 4. And then, like the ones you were showing last week, was the 9-pin JST connector. A lot of people don't realize that our TSU 2200 actually has that 9-pin JST connector on the end of it, so you can trim the insulation back about a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch, and then just simply unplug the harness, set it aside, and then you can plug into the locomotive model's harness right there.
Nice.
So really, it's a quick, easy installation, and it'll depend on the model. For the installation, though, we've been doing a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel, and just kind of talk about that. This is a Broadway Limited, what is that, Mikado 282 that I just got done doing an installation in that we'll be posting on our website and our video. I'm sorry, we'll be posting that on our YouTube channel here very soon. And then one of the real popular videos we had on our YouTube channel sort of surprised me a little bit because it took an hour to get through it, but I went through and set up this Intermountain Tier 4 the way I run my models. So I figured that was been pretty popular. So I'll be doing another one of those here with the steam engine. We've had a couple requests for a steam locomotive setup coming up on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll be posting that on there here pretty soon.
That is fantastic. I love it. Now, one more question, George. You got the decoder
Yes.
plugged in. The decoder's ready for sound. Do I simply plug the speaker into a jack, or do I wire the speaker? How does that work?
There's usually, like say for example, on the TSU 2200, there's 2 wires that come off that you'll wire to the speaker once you get it mounted. The PNP decoder will have 2 solder pads that you'll take some wires from the speaker and actually solder to the decoder itself. And then there's other cases like the 21-pin, depending on the motherboard, should have solder pads on there for the speaker as well. So it'll vary. And then if you're doing large scale, like our O scale and our G scale decoder, the TSU 4400, there's actually screw terminals. So you can attach the speaker directly.
And another thing you guys have got is a current keeper, which is wonderful for smaller engines or for the guys that have got those great big frogs that are not powered on their turnouts, so things don't stall.
So I have a Broadway Limited big boy,
Yes.
and I sent it to George, and he put one in mine, and I absolutely love it. It makes it run flawlessly.
That's awesome.
Yes. I agree.
I'm glad you're enjoying that.
I
That was
am.
a fun project. I may have to go get one of my own now.
They're nice.
George,
I like
George did that for me too on these M1s.
Yeah,
Both of them. There's
Yeah.
one here. There's one here.
And they run perfectly
He put
together,
a speaker in
boy.
the boiler, and he put a speaker in the tender, so it's got great sound.
Very nice.
And ever since I've gotten them back, I've run them twice. I know. I never have time to run trains. George, we love you. 15% off. WNTW guys out there that want to buy SoundTraxx decoders.
That's
Thank
right.
you very much, Nancy and George.
And I do want to say, Greg, you've got a fantastic layout. I did, Ken told me you were going to be on today, so I spent some time looking at the pictures. And I got to say, I'm impressed. What part of Texas are you? Because I'm originally from the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Dallas-Fort Worth area. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, next time I come down to visit the folks, I'll have to get in touch with you, come out for an off session.
Absolutely. We'd love to have that. So that'd be great.
Speaking of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I'd just like to give a shout out that Sugar Fire is coming to Dallas.
How about that?
We'll have the store open. You can check us out on Facebook at Sugar Fire Dallas.
Dallas.
That's right.
Greg, another thing that impresses me about you is you're like Dave Davis. You really like to do unusual freight car loads. Why don't you talk about some of the cool loads that you do?
Okay. Yeah. So, the interstate, we kind of do a mixture of actual loads and live loads and actual mounted loads. And so, we try to really capture the essence of what the interstate's moving. Some of the unique loads are sugar beets, right? So we've done some sugar beets, glass cullet. That was kind of cool using glitter. Never thought that would turn out so well. That has been such a hot, exciting. I've posted on my Facebook page and blog, and I've had so many people just jump into the cullet's amazing looking, just glitter.
We're showing pictures of it right now.
Yeah. And then also I like using removable loads. So I have the Coke and coal loads going for the sugar beet plant specifically. So the loads would come on layout, actually loaded, and then they're of course cycled out and then removed for the empty return. So I'm able to use cars in both directions. And moving to more of the open top loads, we've done some really interesting ones. So one I did a couple of years ago was actually those American Model Builders, their wind blade kits. Built a wind train, and so,
yes.
My layouts, being in a smaller room, I have a little bit smaller radius, 28 to 30 inch radius. So 89-foot cars are not the most exciting things to see on my layout. Just gonna be honest with it. So Atlas, their 68-foot flat is a great selectively compressed car if you're trying to get a large load, but you don't have the length of an 89-footer. And so these blades are about 30 meters long. They're probably the smallest blades on the wind market, or even smaller what's on the market. But you're able to use that blade over two cars, and you can really create the essence of what does a wind blade on rail do, and it actually operates like the prototypes you can see out there on the BNSF UP. Very much the same kind of technique and the same concepts of overhanging and bridging between the two loads. So it does capture it, and it's a lot of fun to run. Especially when it comes on layout, the guys are like, "Wow, here it comes!" And so, but we've done that. That was kind of the first of my interesting loads. I have a friend also that does a lot of great loads, and so there's a center beam with aluminum. I guess those are like aluminum rods, if you will. And so he actually builds them to the AAR Open Top Loading Rule Guide, and that's really cool. That's a great resource for anyone trying to build their open top loads. And you don't have to. They can study photos, but you can actually also go to the AAR's website, and that open top loading rules is open now to all individuals. So in the past it was a paid service for railroads and shippers. Now people can actually go on there and open up the PDF guides, and it will tell you what kind of boards you're using, what kind of steel, what kind of tie downs, so you can really mimic your load to the prototype with very easy to follow guides that are actual diagrams, which is really cool to do. And so the name's Jock, who does them. Fantastic work, and so that's one of his loads that it's heavy. I mean, that load is as heavy as it looks. And then one of the most recent ones I've done, kind of going into this COVID season, I would say during the Model Railroad high times, was the wreck on the hospital flat, which turned out really cool. And that started with really a $5 Walthers flat car I found on eBay. And I was like, sure, why not? Let's see what happens. And so it was an 89-footer, cut it down, removed about 15 foot from it, so it's around 74-ish feet long. So it still has the look of a longer car where you have the trucks kind of about 15 foot in from the end sills. So it still looks like a big car, and it still acts like a big car. But the real cool thing is the removable deck. So, and that kind of got us into the whole 3D printing. That was actually the first, I would say, putting your toe into the water. Was we needed the pedestals for all those cars. Except the red streaks that were out there, the QUAX cars have pedestals that are mounted to the deck, and one of them can slide based on the car that's being transported for shop. The railroads will load them up on there. Whether it's a flat car, box car. And so we had to create those pedestals. And so that was kind of our first dive into the 3D printing and said, we got to make these because I'm not going to fashion them out of styrene. It's just too crazy. So that's where we started, and the wreck turned out fantastic. So literally the deck, I have a completely loaded deck, and then also have a copycat empty deck. And so depending on where a car is in the loaded empty cycle on the railroad, I can just pull it off and put it in, so I don't have to have two cars. And that was a really neat concept. And I thought, sure, why not? And in having that removable deck actually kind of made the car seem less like a channel type flat and more closer to a flush deck type flat because it kind of shimmed up the overall deck height. So that was a fun project.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Working with ridiculously tiny chains, that was thrilling, absolutely thrilling. So patience of anyone can be tested with having to use a little tiny chains from A-line. So, but they work out great, and it turned out fantastic in the end. So,
whose tank car did you use when you made that load?
So that car originally was a BNSF fuel tender car I picked up like $10. It was an Athearn car, RTR, and I dropped it. So it's been in my deadline for about 4 years now, waiting for repairs, and it's really those RTR cars are still very intricate.
Oh yeah.
And I finally said, screw it. Took it outside and threw it across the garage a couple times, and I said, here we go. And it's perfect. So one
neat.
side really has that beat up. Took it to a grinder and a few other things and tried to sand it out, but yeah, it's got definitely derailed and went into a ditch of some sort and made a contact, which. The car, the hospital flats called for anything from a small end seal damage to, full-on destruction like you saw. As long as it's intact as a car, they can haul it. The railroads can haul it. But if it's, compromised and they can't actually put up on the bolsters, then they usually will scrap it at site.
That's amazing. I know that some of the turbine propeller loads for these power generating fans out there, they're getting to be up to 240 feet long.
Yeah.
So you're going to require a couple of flat cars, 89 footers, and
Yes.
idler cars on a load like that. And I hope someday that you model one of those full length ones like that. That would be interesting. You also have a beautiful ore boat on your layout. So obviously you've got a wharf scene. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes. Yeah. So that was I blame there was a great model railroad book that came out about wharfs and terminal operations along the waterfront, and it had some really great stuff in there. Bernie Kopinski did a great job in that book, and I literally read the book and I said, I want to add that. So I got the scroll saw and I started cutting the foam. I was like, I'm gonna have this little jetty here, and just ripped it out. And I said, okay, I gotta find a boat. So overall, I kind of walked through some of that quick dive into the hole. I'm gonna cut a hole in this layout and put in a water scene. So it turned out pretty good. And the boat itself is a whole nother level of modeling that I think a lot of even model railroaders had never experienced. And that was a vacuum formed plastic kit from Barraco Marine, and it was like $400 when I purchased it. And the directions are very freelance. Here's templates and things, but it's gonna be kind of up to you to really kind of design it and detail it out to where you want. And so going down a whole different avenue with 1/87th scale marine stuff that you have to go find vendors that sell marine kits and parts, and not necessarily Walthers, but there's other vendors out there in a whole different world of modeling.
That's true.
And so took that dive. But I think in the process of doing that was mid 2018, I started working on that boat. It still is in process now, but you learn a lot of new skills and concepts taking the dive like that. And I think it was intimidating to get into it as a modeler. And I think a lot of times us as modelers listening in or watching, we get to those points in our modeling careers where we have to take that step, and it
Yes.
may not be perfect. And I think on playing that boat, I'm pretty sure there's a few areas in that boat that are not exactly plumb plain, but for the situation of learning the concept, learning how to work in that media, multimedia, if you will, it turned out great. And so that's where we are with it. It is literally as big as it looks. So the hard part is trying to move it around. Having a literal table, it's almost 6 foot long. So having a table to literally work on it, it's in the garage, it's on the kitchen table, and of course, the CFO, she's like, "When's this going to be moved? This is not for the kitchen table." So that's the fun part of and the kids are always looking at it, like, "Well, Dad, you can work on this boat this week, or you can add more to it." But if I thought handrail stanchions were bad and HO scale for locomotives, this boat takes it to a whole nother level of individual brass handrails, probably around 50 to 60 on each side. So that's all hand-strung wire as well.
That's really cool. In just a few minutes tonight, Joshua and I are going to take one of my favorite handheld throttles here, and that is the nice Pro Cab. I'm also going to use my TCS throttle over there because they work both together. But in September's What's Neat video that I just finished editing, George Bogatalk did a segment on programming tracks and how to use them and what they're for on your layout. And he used his Power Cab, which is the other system I've got sitting on the table on my computer stand over here. And that's the one where it's got its own power system. But he showed us how you can just use the Power Cab, George, to program on your programming track. I didn't know you could do that, George, so I learned something from your video.
Well, that's a good thing because, I'm big on education because, I look back in the time before I had the name on my shirt and, I was one of the DCC gurus in the club. And now that I'm in the industry, I look back and I think of how much I didn't know. And so I make that a really big goal of mine because the more you know, the better off you are. And the only limitation is your own personal decisions. And, rather than being afraid to do something with, like, say, a Power Cab or anything like that, because you don't know what buttons are going to do what. And so that's why we've been posting a lot of information on our YouTube channel, including a webinar series that even just goes so far as to talk about what is DCC. There's even one that talks about how to use the Power Cab or the Pro Cab. We use a Digitrax system and we use a MRC system, and we just teach you how to control your trains using those 3 major systems. So when it comes to information, we definitely want to be there to help you guys understand what you're doing so that you can get the most out of it. And part of the reason I did that programming track video is because, when we get calls all the time when it comes to customer service, one of the biggest things that one of the most common troubleshooting things we do is ask people to put it on the programming track and try to read a CV. Usually we ask to read CV8 because that's the manufacturer ID, and our manufacturer ID is 141.
I knew that.
So if you can read back 141 on your programming track, that tells me the decoder's probably okay. Now let's try to figure out why it's doing what it's doing so that way we can get you on your way and enjoying your trains again. And so that's part of why I wanted to do that segment. Here on my layout, everything's powered through the Power Cab, so I don't have a separate dedicated programming track. And so in that video, I showed you to use a couple of pieces of Auto Unitrack and make your own programming track. So you can take the wires for the layout, unplug them, and then plug them into this small isolated programming track. So it gives you the ability to talk to just that decoder, because if I was to do it on the main line, everything that has a decoder would have to come off of the track.
Right.
And that becomes a time consuming and pain in the butt, and you end up not doing it. So this is a quick and easy way that I can show everybody that, look, you do have the option to have a programming track. So
That's awesome.
I appreciate the opportunity to put it out there, and I hope everybody learns from it.
I appreciate when you help me make that What's Neat show, because that's in addition to doing the podcast every single week, I've got to do that once a month show for Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine, and that's why it's 7 days a week down here.
That's
because
right.
I've still got to take care of the kids, take care of the yard, da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, right. Best hobby in the world, right? With the best
Absolutely.
people in it, like Greg McComas and George
That's
and
right.
Joshua Sugarfire. And we've got a whole bunch of guests in the back over here waiting to run some trains tonight. So with that, I think we're going to close out 125. Greg, I'd like to have you come back because the photos you shared with us tonight are amazing. And I know you've got a lot more great stories to tell.
Thank you, Ken.
So with that,
Appreciate it.
guys, the best hobby in the world. With you, the viewer, the best people in the hobby. We love all you guys. Be sure to check out the What's Neat show at Model Railroad Hobbyist Magazine. It just came out today. And thank you so much for all the kind comments that I've read so far on the What's Neat for August. And so with that, guys, let's go run some trains.
That's right. See you later.
Let's do it.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
guys.